in their beauty, diversity, and fragility. Terry particularly loved the Ozarks. His property represents 6 different biomes typical of the Ozarks. For over 50 years, Terry made Cedar Creek, Missouri his home and his hobby his profession. Today, we celebrate Terry's many talents and accomplishments. Some of you may not know that my brother was a master pie maker. Whenever employees celebrated their birthdays, Terry made their favorite pie. He always brought pies to dinner. Terry was an excellent cook. When guests or clients came to the studio, Terry would always prepare a meal. He said people couldn't drive this far and not have any place to eat. Sometimes that meant feeding 30 MSU students and their faculty. He not only collected hundreds of albums and at playing the piano and saxophone. The talents we recognize most were Terry's scientific knowledge and his artistic ability, the remarkable way he could combine those talents. In the tribute video back here, if you haven't seen it yet, you'll see some of the exhibits that Terry and his staff have created for natural history museums and national and state park visitor centers and other nature-related venues. You may wish to take a tour of the studio and see how the exhibits are built. Terry was a collector. If you join us on one of the tours, you'll get a sense of the scope of his collections. He sometimes could take old rusted pieces of trash and turn them into art. When Terry was in 4th grade, our parents took us to an associate of dad's, Ray and Dorothy Downey, home for dinner. And after dinner, they gave us a little tour of their rock collection, and they were artists, and they showed us some of their paintings and things. And I recall Terry going home with a shoebox full of rocks. And of course, every rock had the name found. We lived in southern Indiana at the time, which was a real rich area in Devonian period fossils. And Terry and I would ride our bikes to the Falls of Ohio and fossil hunt. When a new subdivision was being built, we'd go out and comb through the excavations to hunt for fossils. Every family outing from 4th grade on turned into a rock hunting adventure. There was a creek in Salem, Indiana that was rich with geodes. There was a farmer's field that was a bed of arrowheads. A road cut was an ideal hunting ground for Terry and his rock, hammer, and his chisel. And outings. I recall one vacation out west where I spent the time reading in the car while Terry and our parents were off rock hunting in a Wyoming field where only the antelope play. As an adult, Terry hunted and bargained for specimens all over the world. Terry collected corals, shells, and sponges. Our Uncle George would take Terry to uninhabited islands on the Gulf Coast and hunt for shells. When our parents moved from Indiana to Ohio, they had to have a whole separate moving van just for Terry's rock and shell collection. Terry was also an artist. Our mother saw something in him real early in his drawings, and it prompted her to enroll him in art school at age 5. I was a year behind him in school, and our elementary teachers always said, "Do you do bulletin boards like your brother?" And Terry, in 7th grade, Terry's entry in the school science fair was a Devonian sea bottom diorama with most of the animals made out of modeling clay. He won 1st place. It was amazing. A local bank wanted to display the diorama in its window, and Terry was so excited about taking some of his friends and family to see it. Well, the sun shining in the front window, unfortunately, had melted the modeling clay, and in Terry's words, had turned it into snot. He continued to build bigger and more secure dioramas and continued to win 1st or 2nd place at state and national science fairs. He still receives up in the library the yearbook every year from the World Book Encyclopedia for his, I think it was National Science Fair competition. Terry always sought out mentors. George Engel, Terry's Jeffersonville High School art teacher, took a particular interest in helping Terry experiment with all types of media. Terry's second place entry in the National Let Freedom Grow awarded him a scholarship from to a school of his choice. He went to Wittenberg University, where a counselor told him, "Now, Terry, you're going to have to choose a major. You can't do art and geology, they're just not compatible." Well, Terry knew differently because he had already been volunteering in the Louisville Museum of Natural History as a high schooler. He would volunteer in trade for rock specimens, of course. And then he spent a summer the year before he went to Wittenberg as an intern at the Chicago Field Museum. And he had admired the beauty and the scientific accuracy of dioramas that were built by George Marchand and his brother and their father before them. And we're very happy to have Jeanette here, one of George Marchand's nieces, at our ceremony today. After graduation from Wittenberg, Terry was in National Guard and he taught art at Springfield South High School in Ohio. Then he went on to study paleontology for his master's degree at the University of Michigan. While at Michigan, he was able to study with George Marchand, and he became his mentor, which turned into a very deep friendship. George was wanting to retire and move to Branson, Missouri to fish. He was so impressed with Terry's skills and knowledge that he encouraged Terry to take over a contract for a job in Midland, Texas, where oil companies were coming together to build a petroleum museum. Terry and a college friend, George Baldwin, built a walk-through Permian Basin with thousands of individual models. Meanwhile, George Marchand was searching for a property here in the Ozarks that Terry could use to build a studio. 4 small buildings. That little tiny part right there was the studio. The house was the office. Terry lived in the cabin there, and George lived in the other cabin. And that's what was here. And Terry has now designed this whole thing that a lot of people describe like a small college campus. Terry always had visions of what could be. When he hung up from talking to a potential client, he already had a complete vision in his head of exactly what that project would look like. He could sit down and sketch it, and usually the proposal that he wrote would exceed the client's expectations. In Terry's first proposal to the Smithsonian, he submitted photos of 4-season dioramas he had recently completed from the Berger Meatpacking Company in California, Missouri. The director of the Smithsonian project said, "Well, how do we know you didn't just go out in the woods and take photos?" And Terry said, "Well, I guess I can take that as a compliment." And that was the start of a very long relationship with the Smithsonian, including the life-size right whale phoenix that's hanging in the ceiling of the Natural History Museum. Every project brought on new challenges. The latest, one of the latest, is the talking tree recently installed at the Butterfly Palace in Branson. Children talk to the tree, and the tree talks back. Terry knew that if he was going to keep people engaged, he would have to make the exhibits interactive. One of Terry's greatest honors for receiving an honorary doctorate was receiving an honorary doctorate from Wittenberg University for his achievements in advancing science. He always downplayed any kind of awards or accomplishments, but the media told his story. If you haven't watched the CBS Sunday Morning feature on Terry, you can view it on the website of Chase Studio. There's also some new PBS videos on there. And there's also 2 tours on the website that Terry was giving of clients, and you can look for those. You just go to the About section. I think you'll find those interesting. Terry was all about education. He trained over 200 artists and interns, many that are here today. He closely worked with Missouri State University in establishing its museum studies program, especially encouraging people interested in natural sciences. He had the opportunity to work with interns from MSU, Drury, and College of Ozarks. He also developed and taught a course on museum techniques. We have established a scholarship in Terry's name for the MSU Museum Studies program for students interested in natural history. We have to have $25,000 for it to become an endowment. So I hope you picked up the little form that has the little code on it that you can just click on your phone and donate. One of Terry's achievements that he had dreamed about and had planned for many, many years did not come to fruition during his lifetime anyway, the building of the Ozark Museum of Natural History. He created a detailed plan book of a 3-story museum, and Terry's nephew, Patrick, built a detailed model of all the exhibits. You'll see this on the tour. Terry was sure that he was going to live to be at least 95 to 101. He told everyone, I'm going to live to 101. He even told his doctor, when the doctor told him he had 6 weeks to live, he said, picked his head up and looked at him. He said, no, I need 20 more years. So Terry, really wanted this museum built. And if there's anyone out there that would like to start a capital campaign for the Ozark Museum of Natural History, I hope you'll talk to me, because there are a lot of ideas that they had. And I think it's a possibility, but we can't do it alone. There's nothing that could celebrate Terry's life and accomplishments more than to build that museum. Thank you. Now we have Dr. Johnson.
First, a reading from the first chapter of Genesis, verses 20 through 25. Then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the 5th day. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And a reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. But Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. God is indeed our creator, and it is a wonderful place to be standing here today, sitting here amongst the trees, amongst the irises, amongst the gardens, all of the things that Terry put in place, but God put in place as our creator. God is the creator of heaven and earth, of you and me, of the trees and the flowers and the birds and the bears. Terry was chosen by God to recreate, to amazing exhibits of life, past and present, so could learn
Terry's talents to make leaves and birds and whales look real was amazing and may never be replicated. He saw the perfection and the everything. His exhibits have and will continue to teach people about the beauty, diversity, and most importantly, how fragile God's creations are. His exhibits in museums around the world remind all who see them that what we must do to protect this earth and all living things. During Terry's last days, he couldn't speak very much, but he wrote notes. And one note that he wrote
nephew. We moved out here in 1998 and lived just down the road for about 4 or 5 years, 3, 4 years, something like that. But the experience of being able to be here and be around Terry and all that he's created, and take probably 3,000 tours of the studio, which is why you might not be on one today, was just an incredible introduction to the world of science, to natural history, and to the love of the outdoors. And it, I think, helped shape both me and my brother's lives pretty substantially, and helped us land where we're at right now and what we're doing. So I'm a chemist. He's working towards doing things in design and things like that. And the biggest compliment I can pay to Terry is his extreme passion of natural history, and how he has brought access to accurate depictions and beautiful depictions of natural history to millions of people. And that's not an exaggeration. It's really incredible. So thank you all for coming here and celebrating this with us, and thank you very much. I'm Timber Rhodes. I've been an employee here for 35 years, and I just cut ahead as the director of the museum. I've got a wife that's ill. I can't leave her alone too long, so I appreciate your graciousness in letting me get up here and give my little few words here in honor of Terry. I remember when I first met Terry, before I moved to Missouri, I was a successful silversmith jeweler in Arizona, and I moved here with my wife to Missouri, which is where she was born, and I worked at the stained glass studio for about 5 years, and I had kept portfolios, photos of the work I'd done at those places, and when the stained glass job ended, I needed to do something, so I went to work for an acrylic fabrication shop. You've seen all the big plastic cases that we make for exhibits. I did that kind of stuff. And one day this fellow walked in and he said, "I need a 4x8 sheet of quarter-inch acrylic." And I always enjoyed asking the customers what it was they were going to use it for and everything. And so I asked Terry, and he said, "Well, I have a natural history exhibit business down in Cedar Creek." And I said, "Where in the world is Cedar Creek?" And he kind of explained that to me. I thought that was pretty interesting. And he told me a little bit about what they do. So I just kept that tucked in the back of my mind. And interestingly enough, the owner of that business passed away. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have any real prospects in Springfield. And my wife and I had vacationed once a year down in Florida. And so I thought, we talked it over, and I said, "Well, I'm going to go down and talk to that guy who bought the sheet of acrylic." And he said, "That sounds like kind of interesting work. And if that doesn't work out, we're moving to Florida." And at the time, we were living in a little cabin up on the Palm de Terre River, about 25 miles north of Springfield. So I came down here. I had no idea what the real estate market was down here. So I thought, well, I'll kill two birds with one stone. I stopped into the realtor's office in Forsyth, and the lady said, well, why don't I take you out to Cedar Creek and I'll take you to the Chase Studio place and you can talk to that guy and then I'll show you some places. She was kind of goofy. We never did buy a house from her. But anyway, I said, that sounds great. So I showed up here in a car with a realtor sign on it, the realtor driving, and I got out and I had my jewelry and stained glass portfolios with me. And I went in and I knocked on the door, and I can't remember who the secretary was at the time, but I was invited in, and I said, I'd like to speak to Terry Chase. And I heard this monotone voice. Most of you know how Terry would talk. I'm Terry Chase. And I thought, oh, what am I getting myself into? But anyway, I went in, I reminded him where I'd met him before. He remembered that. And I said, I am looking for a job. I think what you do is fascinating. And I brought you some pictures of some of the things I've done in the past. And so Terry said, well, let me see the portfolios. And he took them and looked through them. And he said, well, can you start today? That was 35 years ago. And, you know, I have to say, I've never worked for a man like Terry Chase before. It is incredible, the combination, and Debbie spoke of it some, the combination of his intense understanding of the natural world and his just incredible aesthetic sense. You know, to be such an incredible scientist would have been a major accomplishment for anybody. But to be such an incredibly gifted, and I mean gifted because it is a gift, artist as Terry was, would have been also an incredible accomplishment for anybody. But to have those two things together, wow. And so basically for 35 years, I kind of drifted into specializing in invertebrates, insects, and marine things and so on. In that 35 years, Terry was always a really good person to work for. You know, we had a few differences. I mean, everybody does. But basically, Terry was always so fair. He wanted it to be a nice environment for his employees. And duh, is it a nice environment? Wow, is it? Terry always paid more than fairly. And Terry was always very demanding. He gave the best and he expected the best. And because of that, he brought out the best in the people that worked here. And, you know, I look around and I see people here that I haven't seen for 20 years, 25 years. It's wonderful because I look at all these people that worked here, usually for long periods of time, and I haven't met a one who said, boy, that was the biggest mistake of my life. You know, Terry was a mentor. He was a good boss. He was a heck of a nice guy. And it was incredible to watch him mix up colors. I'd be struggling along with mixing up color. And he'd say, oh, just add a little alizarin crimson. Boom, there it was. You know, Terry he was just so skilled. But at the same time, he didn't have his head in the clouds or anything. He was very humble about his own abilities. You know, he knew he was a genius, which he was. He knew he was an incredible artist, but he didn't lord it over anybody. You know, you could talk to Terry just like you could talk to your best friend and be comfortable with it. So I could not have asked for a better person to work for and to work with and to have as a friend for these 35 years. I'm thankful to have known Terry. I'm so thankful to have known and worked with so many of you guys over the years. And whatever happens now with the studio, whatever happens with each one of you, I know we've got something that will be taken from this place with us for the rest of our lives that has made us more skilled and hopefully better people than we were before we came here. Thank you, Terry Chase. You know, okay? All right. Thank you, Debbie, for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful celebration for Terry. My name is George Lynn, and I went to undergraduate school with Terry at Wittenberg University. Now, I don't want to date myself or us, but it's also where I met my lovely wife, Nancy. So there's a little longer heritage there. I was a couple years behind Terry. We didn't overlap that long, but certainly long enough to start a lifetime friendship. So you might be asking, who was Terry like back then? I can easily tell you he was the same goofy, fun-loving person that you all knew, but he was just all arms and legs on a skinny kid, a little shorter hair. If there was ever a poster child to define the word nerd, Terry would have served that pretty well. Although Terry and I didn't have many classes together due to our timing, it was apparent that he was already had a solid place in the geology department at Wittenberg. All the professors thought he was great because he soaked up their classes like a sponge, and he all but lived at the department. His peers liked Terry well enough, but some were guarded because he ruined the grading curve in every class that he attended without having to work very hard. During his time in the department, Terry also took on the task of organizing the mineral and fossil display cases, and even came back from grad school to install one of his first dioramas. So I guess that was the point where Terry and me became well known together, because he was the ultimate collector, and back then I was quickly heading in that same direction, but certainly on a much smaller scale. There was always something even more intriguing about Terry, or unusual, odd, weird, depending on your definition. Here's a guy who got 2 degrees in 3 years, while I was happy to nail down 1 in 4 years, who seemed to remember everything we learned and could live on 4 hours of sleep a night, or even go a couple of days without sleep. Pretty unique individual. So during your time at Wittenberg, Terry and I went on several fossil collecting trips in and around the Dayton, Cincinnati area. Some school sponsored, others that he cooked up on his own. It was during these trips that I came to know Terry and would like to share one of our many stories with you. Every year, the Wittenberg professors held a spring break trip to a different part of the U.S. So while other students were going to Daytona Beach to do who knows what, our group of about 20 students and professors went off to bang on rocks across the country. I didn't go on the trip my freshman year because I was playing sports, but did go my sophomore year along with Terry and the other geology majors. We didn't know much about these trips, but I was eager to go. It lasted a full week, and this one was headed to the Appalachian Mountains at the end of March. The first day was mainly driving the school-owned station wagons, no real SUVs back then. A few stops along the highway and lots of car window geology, which Nancy and our 2 daughters have suffered through on all of our family trips. Before first night, we stayed at a friend's house that one of the professors knew, somewhere in eastern Kentucky, which was really appreciated by everyone, as Nancy and I learned after hosting many of these motley crews for several years on our own backyard. But this only happened a couple nights during this trip. The rest of the time, we camped in tents that were owned by the department. And it was cold in March in the Appalachian Mountains. On day 2, after hiking through rock quarries and long road cuts all day, we pulled into the aptly named Hungry Mother State Park, located in the western part of Virginia, at dark, and we were tired and hungry. And it was cold, and it started to snow. While the majority of us started putting up tents and loading in our much too thin sleeping bags, I noticed that Terry was hunched over a picnic table working on something, and I couldn't tell what. But he wasn't helping with the tents. Later on, when I walked back to the station wagons to pick up some more gear, I could see the picnic table more clearly, where on one camp stove, Terry had a skillet full of meat cooking. You know the rest of this story. And on another, it had a large kettle into which tomatoes, sliced onions, spices, and lots of beans were being loaded inside. It turns out Terry was the camp cook. And who of you today are surprised by that? As we all huddled around a small fire in the falling snow, we consumed our fill of the absolute best chili I'd ever eaten, which kept all of us and our tents nice and warm the entire night. So as you can see, the Terry Chase I met 50 years ago is the same one that we've all known and loved. In summary, Terry is the most creative person I've ever known, an artist and scientist who always put education at the forefront, as everybody here attested to. He really pioneered the practice of modern museum design. I firmly believe that, because he wanted to capture nature's perfection in every aspect of his work, regardless of size or complexity. He was a true genius and my friend. I'm David. I was a decades, and my question today is, what defines genius most? Terry Chase was a rare blend, as we've heard, of scientist and artist. And while his compelling knowledge of biology, geology, and paleontology are wholly remarkable, include his deep and thorough mastery of drawing, painting, sculpting, and model making, and you'll pretty quickly run out of superlatives. His vision of the museum arts, I think, is unparalleled. I can't count the times I've heard him called genius by his colleagues, co-workers, and clients alike. His ability to combine the often disparate worlds of art and science into a cohesive 50-year interpretive program of natural history education is surely a high water mark that will stand in the museum world for generations to come. I'm not sure if I've ever met a genius or would recognize one if I did. It's probable that Terry Chase was indeed that genius by whatever measure, and I can't dispute that possibility. I do know that Terry did ingenious things almost on a daily basis. His bag of tricks contained an inexhaustible supply of ingenious techniques. His ability to combine unusual materials and methods to solve some exhibit problem was phenomenal. Once, early in my career with Terry, he said that we needed to make a mold of a gravel bed in order to produce some casts for some upcoming aquarium projects. I allowed, as I had gravel beds on my property on Caney Creek, and I was sure we could find a satisfactory site for the molding operation. He thought that was a good idea too. A few days later, Terry packed latex rubber, burlap, and other supplies and tools for mold making, and we set out for Caney Creek. The creek was down, and there were extensive spans of exposed gravel. We soon found a sample spot that Terry liked. The plan was to create a model of a gravel bed about 4 feet deep, front to back, and 10 feet wide. The final creations would be cast in fiberglass. The spot we chose looked rather average, with a mixture to work with the gravel a bit. So George and I went off to explore other sections of the creek. When we returned, Terry had carefully reordered and rearranged the gravel in our chosen spot. Now, I don't know what could be more uniformly random than a naturally deposited gravel bed. The river constantly picks up stones during floods and deposits them downstream as the water subsides. Our little span of gravel, which had been acceptably pleasing a half hour before, had now been transformed into something better. If you were to walk along the gravel bar and stumble across our little arrangement, you might have noticed it was a bit different, and perhaps you might wonder what caused it. Well, Terry Chase caused it. He took an ordinary pile of river gravel and transformed it into something more aesthetically pleasing than the natural deposit of the river. It wasn't outlandish or overly dramatic. It was just somehow better. Over the next 35 years, I've witnessed many of Terry's ingenious bursts of insight and interpretation. So, back to the question, does it take a genius to recognize that even an humble pile of gravel can be elevated to something more? Perhaps it does, and perhaps Terry Chase was that genius. The world of interpretive science education is much smaller today with Terry's passing. Thank you. Hi, I'm Chuck Preston. I'm a sort of retired professor, museum curator, and museum director. Debbie, thank you so much for inviting me to do this, and Linda for all the work you're doing and all the staff still working here. And so glad to see so many of Terry's former employees, friends, family here. Was 1998 that I was handed really the opportunity of a lifetime to create what became the first major natural history museum designed and developed in and for the 21st century. It was at and is at the Center of the West in Cody, Wyoming, a multi-museum complex. And I was asked to create the Natural History Museum, to come in as curator and director, essentially, of that museum. And we worked for 4 years in developing the museum, first developing the funding for it, and then developing the museum. And I had a very, very clear vision of what I wanted to do with that museum. And it's a walkway through the biomes of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem with nothing behind glass, essentially. So we have cleverly created little mini dioramas that you actually walk through without being able to touch them. And so we had a successful opening in 2002. We had Richard Leakey came, and Clint Eastwood dropped by for the grand opening. Very successful, and I was unsatisfied. I came back, I was pleased, I was thrilled with that, but I walked through and all I could see were the imperfections, the things where my vision didn't quite match up with what, we had wonderful exhibit designers, a group out of Manhattan, I won't call the name, but the group out of Manhattan and fabricators out of Michigan, and architects from Denver that were fantastic, but at the end of the day, I just was a little bit unsatisfied. And so, of course, my colleagues kept saying, Chuck, you're just too much of a perfectionist. Forget that. Let's just go with it. For the next few years, I was travel around the country, addressing audiences in museums around the country. And I'd go and look at their displays, of course. Most of them I'd seen before, but some I hadn't. I was looking specifically for some things that I felt was missing in what our vision was in Draper. And I kept asking, well, who did that? That's a group I'll find. Well, who did that over here in this museum? A guy named Terry Chase came in, and he did this and that. And I said, well, I've heard of this guy. I've got to get in touch with this Terry Chase. He said, well, 2 or 3 different folks. He said, you got to know, Terry Chase is a perfectionist. Thought, oh, this could work out. He said, and he might be hard to work with because he's such a perfectionist. Yes. I said, well, I've got to call him. So I called him and I ran some things by him that I'd like to do. He got the vision immediately. I didn't have to say it twice. He got it. He sent it back to me, improved, of course. And I thought, wow, this is the guy I need to say, well, how much will this cost? I would get grant money each time and such. At that point, then it began a 15-year relationship where Terry and I became first client, and then we became partners and collaborators, and of course, dear friends. Terry was, in fact, a bit of a perfectionist, as all of you know. But in the most, I think it was Kim that said, in the most humble way, and that's true. So he never forced an idea on you. He said, well, what if we did this and that?
And I thought I had vision. Terry had vision beyond mine. And I loved working with him. He was an absolute delight. Never had a problem in any way working with Terry. The more demanding he got, the better it was. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so we began about this Ozark Museum of Natural History. We found we had a shared passion for the Ozarks because I'd grown up here. My graduate degrees in Fayetteville, University of Arkansas. And so the Ozarks was near and dear to me. I found out how passionate he was about the Ozarks. And so we started brainstorming about what that museum would be. And of course, with Terry, nothing's just brainstorming, it goes down on paper. And the finest artwork and the finest ideas. And we kick ideas back and forth. And we did that for the last few years. What I can say about Terry is, I mean, there's so much that we'll miss about Terry. But one thing that will last beyond all of us and generations, and other people have alluded to it, his work across the world and seen every year by millions of people, no exaggeration, will inspire curiosity about the natural world, and inspire a value system toward that. I've seen it happen in the Draper Natural History Museum, where I came from, the Denver Museum of Natural History, where I also worked for a bit, and everywhere I've seen people really enjoy Terry's work. It's inspiring. It may be that Terry was a genius. I'll miss many things about him, but most of all, I miss his enthusiasm, his passion for whatever he did, certainly his skill. I miss those brainstorming sessions so much. I can't pick up the phone anymore. I can't read a new email from him anymore, but I reread the old ones and we keep up with that. I don't know if you classify Terry as genius. I think he was a genius. I've known other geniuses, other people who I would think were geniuses. But what set Terry apart, in my mind, was that he was a genius with the spirit of a 10-year-old. And he kept that until the day he died. I miss him.
My name is Brent, and I serve as Executive Director of the Missouri State Foundation. And I met Terry 10, 15 years ago. Several of the university staff have been up here, and Terry talked about what he wants to do when he passes. And so my first trip, and of course our Tammy was here before, and she sort of explained it, but it's hard to explain to other people once you see it. And I wasn't expecting what I saw. It was incredible. It was like going to a Smithsonian museum. It's hard to explain to other people what's here. And that was so impressive. And every time we came up here for a meeting, we would meet there, and he would have lunch, and he's a great cook, would have pie. He even, remember, pecan pie, he let me have the rest of the pie. I got to take it home, and that was a thrill. But Terry had the forethought of what happens when he passes. And we brought our whole staff up here for a retreat. Terry donated land not too long ago, and we have the Ozarks Education Center just down the road for Missouri State. And it really solidified a great partnership between the university and Terry Chase. And Terry wanted to do something after he passed, to continue his passion, to continue his spirit. And that spirit now will be given to future generations and future generations from on in. Terry would come to Springfield when he was having treatments, and he would meet with us almost every other week, it seemed like, talking about his plans when he passes. Now, the only time I was a little disappointed, Terry, was he did bring a pecan pie to one meeting, and I think only I had one piece and no one else ate anything. And and Terry left, that he left with the pie. I thought I was going to get the rest of the pie. Man, he was a great pie. But Terry's spirit will live on. And what a noble thing to do. Terry and his memory, Terry and his passions will now still be a part of the future, and we will always remember Terry Chase. Thanks be to God for the life of Terry Chase. Our president of the university got to know him as well as we had those discussions, and Mark to say a few words.
Thanks, Brent. To kind of follow up on what Brent was talking about, I've been president for 13 years, and early on in my tenure, I had a conversation with Terry, and we began that conversation of how the university and Chase Studios would connect and continue that connection. And it's really over the last 10 years or so. Dean Tom Peters of our libraries is here today, and the university began to evaluate what can we do, what can we sponsor, be a part of, invest in that no other university can do as well as we can. We're not a flagship university, we're not an Ivy League university, but we're right here in the Ozarks. And so we really began to embrace and lean in to everything connected to the Ozarks. Music, culture, the outdoors, our history. And we think we do that better than anyone because it's ours. That's what Tom has developed our archives into. That's what our science faculty have developed with first the field station and now the education center. It's what we focus on publishing in journals and hosting events. And Terry loved that. And I think that's why Terry left this amazing property to the university. And our commitment to him and to you is that his work will continue. I don't know what that's going to look like exactly, but I know the art, the science, the research, all of that is going to continue. And there are people here, there are faculty members here, Chris Barnhart, Janice Green, Candy Yankee, our Dean of Library Services. All of that is going to continue. And, someone early on in this ceremony said that this reminds people of a little college campus. It's going to be a little college campus. This is going to be a university. And I hope it's a part of us forever, and that amazing things will continue to go on right here. Thank you.
Some of you may not know, but all of this campus will become Missouri State University. And we're really excited. I live right down the road, and so they're going to be my neighbor. There's a little flyer like this. We really would like to support the scholarship in Terry's name. And we would love for you to go on a tour. We'll try to do the best we can, but Linda, where are you? Linda Clark is Terry's secretary and administrative assistant, was named as his personal representative, and she's responsible for this entire place until it goes through probate. And so she is really wanting to make sure that, when you go through the exhibits, don't touch. I mean, there's a gorilla in there you just love to reach out and look at and touch, but don't do it. The collections are extensive, but you won't have much time. We're going to have to do quick tours. We won't do the whole studio, just so that you have a chance, everyone that hasn't seen the studio before will have a chance to go through and see what we have. We have pie. I don't know how many are left, but I think there's probably plenty. And drinks, help yourself. There's a tribute video, as I mentioned. It'll be running continuous. Take time to look at that. I think it's really enjoyable. And just have time to converse with each other. And lots of the employees are here. Yes, ma'am. There's a box over here on the table. You can just put it in there. Okay. And we'll put a notebook together. I've already started it. And after I have time to really go through it all, we'll give it to the university so that they have it. We're trying to make sure that we put pictures and everything else in it so that people will know Terry. And his gravesite is back where the white azalea bush is. If you'd like to go over and just take a handful of dirt and put in it, I'm sure he'd appreciate that. And we would too, because somebody's got to fill in the hole. Oh, it is? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. I mean, it's just such a blessing to see all the friends that Terry had. I mean, he had friends all over the world, and we are streaming this. And I know there are people in all over the U.S. and certainly in Germany and other places that are looking at this today and joining us. So thank you.